Tonight, no exit. The border crossing to get out of Gaza stays closed as tensions over the war rise in Canada. Clashes at a Quebec university. And condemnation for the rising hate on all sides.
This is something that is not acceptable in Canada, period.
Alberta moves to overhaul health care.
The urgency of the challenge can't be overstated.
The mixed reaction over the provincial prescription.
Patients are suffering. There's no other way to say it.
Plus, a bus carrying Shania Twain's crew crashes in Saskatchewan. The accident on an icy highway traveling between tour stops.
CTV National News with Omar Sachedina.
Good evening, everyone. The UN Human Rights Chief told the world today that the atrocities in the Israel-Gaza war amount to war crimes committed by both sides, just as each one stepped up the propaganda battle. Hamas released this video showing street-by-street fighting in Gaza City. While Israel today showed footage of its soldiers over what it says are destroyed Hamas tunnels. While the U.S. still isn't pushing for a ceasefire, there are growing signs tonight there may be a pause to get more aid into Gaza and hostages out. CTV's Heather Wright on the dashed hopes for those desperate to leave.
Salah al-Din Road is now the only way out of Gaza City. The Israeli military has guaranteed safe passage during a daily window, and so thousands are fleeing to the south by foot. The IDF's ground assault into Gaza City is intensifying, and while foreigners, including 75 Canadians, have been able to leave through the Rafah border crossing, it was closed today due to an unspecified security concern. We are hopeful the border will reopen tomorrow, Global Affairs Canada said in a statement, calling the situation fluid and unpredictable.
I feel that I'm born again, really, because I see the death in front of my eyes every minute.
Hani El-Batniji was among the first Canadians to leave Gaza yesterday. Now safe in Egypt, he says he has witnessed the unthinkable.
I smell blood in the street. I smell death in the street, wherever you go.
Today, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights visited the Rafah border crossing. He said war crimes have been committed by both sides in this conflict, which started on October 7th when Hamas brutally murdered 1,400 Israelis.
They were war crimes, as is the continued holding of hostages. The collective punishment by Israel of Palestinian civilians amounts also to a war crime.
While many predict this conflict will be long, today U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken looked to the future, saying that Gaza and the West Bank should be unified under the Palestinian Authority once the war ends.
Gaza cannot continue to be run by Hamas. That simply invites a repetition of October 7th, and Gaza used as a place from which to launch terrorist attacks. It's also clear that Israel cannot occupy Gaza.
Blinken was speaking at a meeting of G7 foreign ministers where they called for more aid for civilians. The Gaza Health Ministry says more than 10,000 people have been killed in the enclave since the war began. Omar.
All right, Heather, thank you. The Prime Minister condemned the increasing number of hateful incidents in this country that are rooted in the conflict overseas.
We're seeing right now a rise in anti-Semitism that is terrifying. This is something that is not acceptable in Canada, period. And period, the rise of Islamophobia we're seeing across this country and around the world is also unacceptable.
But that message didn't make it to Concordia University, where at least one person was arrested after an altercation caught on camera. CTV's Quebec Bureau Chief Geneviève Beauchemin is following the story from Montreal. And Geneviève, tell us what you know about what happened there today.
Omar, this campus confrontation drew outrage, and it had Quebec politicians pleading for calm. At around 1:30 this afternoon, police were called in as security guards were trying to control an altercation that broke out between pro-Palestinian students and pro-Israeli students. They had set up a booth on Concordia grounds in downtown Montreal to raise awareness about the Hamas kidnappings of Jewish citizens. But verbal insults led to tussles over a flag and eventually to violent scuffles. A 22-year-old female student was arrested for assaulting a campus security guard. At least 2 other people, including another security guard and a student, were hurt. The injuries are minor, but this marks a further escalation of tensions related to the conflict in the Middle East. Police report a sharp rise in the number of hate-related incidents across the country over the past month. Calls for calm increasingly ignored. Omar.
Genevieve Beauchemin in Montreal tonight. Jen, thank you. The growing humanitarian crisis in Gaza has been met with mounting calls for a ceasefire across Canada. But as CTV's Kevin Gallagher reports, Ottawa is still only pushing for a pause in the fighting.
The Prime Minister says the horrific images out of Gaza demand action.
We're watching it on TV every night, seeing it all over our social media. And Canadians are hurting and crying out that it needs to stop.
An emotional plea for Justin Trudeau to again call for a humanitarian pause.
A humanitarian pause is going to allow all the hostages to be released, allow us to continue doing the work of getting all foreign nationals out of Gaza.
We demand a ceasefire!
While outside Parliament, protesters say a pause is too short.
I'm not sure what humanitarian aid can do if bombs are still falling. I mean, there's no justifiable reason to not call for a ceasefire right now.
While the difference between a pause and a ceasefire is nuanced, Israel says a ceasefire would leave Hamas in control of the Gaza Strip, something it can't accept after the group's terrorist attack last month.
And the other part of ceasefire is that you're legitimizing the other party, because you're going to have to negotiate with them.
Canada and other G7 countries are trying to balance Israel's right to defend itself with humanitarian concerns in Gaza, while the Bloc Québécois joined the NDP today in calling for a ceasefire.
Par la présence d'une force internationale.
Leader Yves-François Blanchet even advocated for an international military force to protect civilians in Gaza. Angus Reid pollster Shachi Curl says recent data shows 2/3 of Canadians support a ceasefire.
We might start to see more pressure now and other politicians more emboldened to put more pressure on the Prime Minister.
While there is division over what kind of fighting suspension is needed, the devastating conditions and death toll in Gaza are amplifying calls to protect civilian lives. Omar?
All right, Kevin, thank you. A video circulating on social media and reported on by news outlets in India could deepen the diplomatic strain between India and Canada. In it, a Sikh separatist leader says passengers should not travel on Air India flights, including those flying out of Toronto and Vancouver, after November 19th. Joining us now with more is BC Bureau Chief Melanie Nagy, who spoke to the man in the video. And Melanie, what did he tell you, and what are Canadian officials saying about this?
Omar, the India media called the video ominously dangerous, but the man who made it says it's only the launch of a boycott campaign in support for Sikhs seeking independence from India.
Do not fly Air India.
Standing behind a desk are Patwan Singh Panu says no Sikh should fly Air India after November 19th, that traveling on the airline could endanger one's life. Some media outlets in India say Panu, who is designated a terrorist in that country, is spouting serious threats, particularly because Air India was the target of a deadly bombing in 1985. They also claim officials have asked Canada to increase security on flights flying out of Vancouver and Toronto.
Global blockade.
Panu, who is a lawyer in Washington, D.C., and with the organization Sikhs for Justice, firmly rejects all allegations.
There is no threat at all. There is no threat of violence.
He claims he's the target of disinformation. He also says his Air India boycott video that some are taking as a dire warning is a form of protest against the Indian government.
This is our new campaign against Indian regime not to support, strengthen economically any Indian-owned businesses.
Panu says he hasn't been contacted by police in the U.S. or Canada. The RCMP have yet to say whether or not they're investigating, but a spokesperson for the Minister of Transportation says any threats against aviation are taken extremely seriously. Omar?
All right, Mel, thanks. Alberta's premier is proposing sweeping new changes to the province's health system that she says will allow patients to get faster access to care. But there are concerns the plan will add to layers of bureaucracy, even if the goal is to dismantle them. CTV's Alberta Bureau Chief Bill Fortier reports.
In this Edmonton hospital, beds line the hallways.
Patients are suffering. There's no other way to say it.
Doctors say the scene is similar across Alberta. Hospitals over capacity and understaffed.
If we don't have the resources to look after our patients, we suffer alongside them and feel helpless.
Today, the province announced sweeping changes.
The urgency of the challenge can't be overstated.
Alberta Health Services will be replaced by 4 new organizations. One to manage acute care, hospitals and emergency responders, another for primary care, tasked with finding a family doc for every Albertan, a third will be in charge of continuing care for seniors, and a fourth will oversee mental health and addictions.
We will enable each organization to look after one area of healthcare only and avoid the scattered and uncoordinated approach.
I haven't seen any evidence supporting the kinds of changes that they propose.
Critics worry splitting healthcare into 4 components will lead to more bureaucracy and confusion. Yesterday, the opposition NDP released what it claims are leaked internal government documents that suggest a risk of service disruptions or failures associated with the plan.
Why, as a patient, would you want 4 entities now in charge of healthcare services you might need?
We want to ensure that at the higher level, there's integration of these 4 organizations.
The Premier insists advice from doctors and other experts will help form a new system that works better than the current one.
This is all about refocusing our healthcare system to prioritize patients and empower healthcare workers.
Alberta's health minister says she doesn't know what the cost of the transition will be. It's expected to take a year to a year and a half to get the new organizations in place. Omar.
All right, Bill, thank you. The state of healthcare in Quebec also came under the microscope today as members of the union representing 80,000 nurses hit the picket lines. The nurses are calling for more pay and better working conditions. They've been without a contract since March.
When we were in COVID, we were the angel, we were the best. But now COVID is over, it's like, oh, just forget about them.
The nurses plan to stage another 2-day walkout later this month. There is late word tonight of a major breakthrough in the Hollywood actors' strike. Their union reached a tentative deal with the big film and TV studios to end the 4-month-long work stoppage that has shut down production. The actors demanded more pay, a cut of streaming revenue, and protections from being replaced by replicas created by AI. The agreement still needs to be ratified by the union membership. Grammy-winning singer Shania Twain's Queen of Me tour in Canada hit a roadblock this morning when her tour bus crashed near Regina. CTV's Alison Bamford joins me now with the details. Alison, what do you know about what happened?
Omar, a crew bus and truck were involved in a highway crash while heading to their next stop on the prairie leg of the Country Stars tour. 13 people were taken to hospital. The singer was not on the bus. RCMP responded to the rollover on Highway 1 about 100 kilometers east of Regina, near the town of Wolseley, around 7 o'clock this morning. At that time, RCMP closed that stretch of road from the crash all the way to the Manitoba border due to poor road conditions. Officers say those taken to hospital were treated for non-life-threatening injuries. Shania Twain's management company, Maverick Management, confirmed they were members of her production crew on their way from Winnipeg to Saskatoon. In a statement, Maverick Management saying in part, multiple vehicles countered dangerous driving conditions due to inclement weather. We are incredibly thankful to the emergency services teams for their quick response. Twain performed in Winnipeg last night and is set to play Saskatoon's SaskTel Centre tomorrow night, followed by stops in Calgary and Edmonton before wrapping up her Queen of Me tour in Vancouver next week, in the hope that it can only go up from here. Omar?
Some scary moments. All right, Alison Bamford in Regina tonight. Ivanka Trump repeatedly answered, "I don't recall," during testimony at her father's civil fraud trial in New York today. The former president's daughter distanced herself from Donald Trump's business when questioned about his real net worth and financial documents. She was the fourth and final member of the Trump family to testify. The former U.S. president is fighting a $250 million penalty for inflating his assets to get more favorable loans. And the current U.S. president's son, Hunter, brother James, and a family associate have been subpoenaed by House Republicans, an escalation of the impeachment inquiry into Joe Biden. Among the allegations, that he personally profited from foreign business dealings during his time as vice president. The White House denies it. Coming up.
It's a joke. It's basically the government almost telling us, well, stop doing this.
Some Ontario pharmacies are shipped empty boxes with no shots. Well, as you can probably tell by the sound of my voice, we are well into the season when colds and flus like to pay some of us a visit, making vaccines for many a hot commodity. But taking a shot at finding a shot is proving to be a challenge, especially in Ontario. CTV's Judy Trin explains.
This is going to be your flu shot today.
One shot for the flu, one for COVID-19. A double jab that Health Canada says is safe to do.
It's incredibly important that everybody gets this. This isn't a partisan issue. It is a miracle of science.
In addition to the flu shot, the federal government has ordered 12 million doses of the COVID vaccine for the provinces to distribute. But in Ontario, some pharmacies are getting shipments without the supply.
More paper.
We get these massive boxes in the pharmacy. We have quite a few left over, and then you just end up getting something this size. It's a joke.
Toronto pharmacist Kiro Massey operates one of more than 450 pharmasaves in Ontario. The chain must rely on Shoppers Drug Mart to deliver its doses. The Ontario government awarded Shoppers the distribution contract for 1/4 of all vaccines in the province. The Ontario Health Ministry says it's aware of the issues and has met with Shoppers and PharmaSave and continues to have regular touch points over the course of the vaccine rollout. But uncertainties grow with each empty box. Massey can't book appointments or schedule staff, so he's shutting down his vaccination program.
On a daily basis, I'm turning away something like 50 people, 60 people.
Problems of distribution are coming at a time when flu and COVID cases are rising.
There is some increase in the prevalence of COVID-19 and the different subvariants in Canada.
Bottom line, fewer pharmacies offering vaccination means less accessibility, which could result in lower immunization rates. Judy Trin, CTV News, Ottawa.
Still ahead. The life-saving impact of giving up smoking. There is a small bright spot to tell you about tonight, to a disease so many Canadians have been forced to confront: cancer. But new data today shows there's progress for one of the deadliest types. Here's CTV's Vanessa Lee.
More Canadians are surviving the most common and deadly form of cancer, responsible for 1 in 4 cancer deaths. Isabelle Villot feels lucky her tumor was detected early.
I lost my best friend to the exact same lung cancer that I had, but hers was detected far too late.
Villot's lung tumor was caught during regular monitoring after battling colon cancer. The Quebec businesswoman has now been cancer-free for a year and counting. She got this tattoo on her wrist as a reminder to stay positive.
It helped a lot in the healing process, I have to say.
Lung cancer deaths are dropping faster than any type of cancer, down 4% in the last 8 years, largely because fewer Canadians are lighting up. The decline over the decades is dramatic. About half of Canadian adults smoked in 1965, compared to just 12% in 2021.
The strong advocacy for commercial tobacco control has really led to impacts for reducing lung cancer incidence rates.
Still, it's estimated more than 20,000 Canadians will die from lung cancer this year. Other risk factors include radon gas, asbestos, and air pollution. Doctors say they are making steady progress in both treatment and prevention, though screening dropped significantly during the pandemic.
It's a bit early now to know exactly how the long-term effects of the pandemic will play out, but it certainly has not been as major an onslaught as we had initially worried about.
The Canadian Cancer Society is aiming to cut down the smoking rate even more to 5% by 2035, estimating it could prevent at least 50,000 cancer cases. Vanessa Lee, CTV News, Montreal.
After the break, portraits from Canada's wartime past and the modern-day mission to track them down. A little-known piece of Canadian war history is on display in Winnipeg. During the Second World War, some of this country's greatest contemporary artists contributed to the war effort by creating paintings that were turned into prints and sent to army bases overseas to boost morale. Most of that art was lost. CTV's Manitoba Bureau Chief Jill Makashon on the gallery owner who's made it his personal mission to track the precious pieces down.
A Canadian soldier pining for home may have found comfort in a Charles comfort, a sense of consolation in an Emily Carr. Beautiful art to inspire soldiers in the brutality of war.
It gives them images of what they're fighting for and what they'll come back to.
Winnipeg's Mayberry Gallery is showcasing a sample of what became the largest public art project in Canadian history. Known as the Samson Matthews Print Program, it started as the Second World War began. Group of 7 artist A.Y. Jackson helped move this idea from the canvas to the battleground.
He had been a war artist during the First World War, and he remembered how dismal the barracks were and how non-Canadian they were and how, you know, at that time you were fighting for king and country, not Canada.
Those beautiful landscapes of home became the inspiration.
Northern River by Tom Thompson was created in 1916. So it was loaned to the project from the National Gallery.
And Canada's best artists of the day were encouraged to create new works for the war effort. These were made into silkscreen prints and sent to barracks, mess halls, and military war offices across Canada and Europe.
Pretty much more than 50,000 were made and shipped overseas during the war. We also know that virtually none of those came back.
The full collection has never been recovered, and prints that sold for $5 then are worth thousands today. Canadian art history that has been documented in books for the next 2 weeks will be exhibited in this Winnipeg gallery.
I hope you leave with a little knowing something you didn't know when you walked in.
A project that instilled national pride, boosted morale, and reminds us still of a country worth fighting for. Jill Makashon, CTV News, Winnipeg.
Such incredible talent and a fascinating history. That is a snapshot of this Wednesday. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching and see you tomorrow. Good night.